Hi, thank you for a very interesting talk. I'm dealing mostly with misinformation and conspiracy theories, and one of the elements that we talk about when we speak about misinformation is the fact that it declined the trust in science, and it's one of the issues that we need to think about when we're dealing with these kind of things. So how do you think the element of trust might have changed based on the fact that we encounter with a lot of fake news and disinformation online? Yeah, that's my question. Thank you.
Yes, this is a really important question, I think, and I have to admit that I haven't touched on it at all, about the problems or the downsides of that, and especially misinformation. One thing that is usually debated is if there's like a loss of trust about science in science in society. And we cannot see that in every survey that we have seen in different countries globally. Trust in science stays pretty stable at a high point and is trusted more than politics and journalism, so other systems in society. But then there's also this kind of group, about 13 to 15% that don't trust science at all. And I think this is kind of where fake news and misinformation comes in, because there's either kind of the idea that you can say, you can use the features of science to make people trust information. I think Marjorie Taylor Greene just last week said there are only two genders, trust the science. It was on a slide behind her, and I laughed very much. But then there's also kind of the other side to deconstructing something by saying this is scientific or science-related populism, that you say, well, there's elites that kind of want to do something or manipulate society or you, and scientists are the elites, and this is also something that is used in misinformation, and features of science as uncertainty and complexity are used to deconstruct science, and this is a huge problem. And yeah, we need, I think this is also something that supports the notion that we need to teach people how to make good trustworthiness judgments, because then they might be more able to identify manipulative notions in this kind of posts and misinformation. But it's a huge problem, yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. Are there other questions over there?
Yeah, thank you from my side also for this nice presentation. I found it very interesting. And one question is, did you also specifically looked at the mechanisms of social media, for example, like algorithms or the blue check on Twitter? These signs are also to generating trust. For example, if you have the blue check, you would say, okay, it's trustworthy to look at this person. Or if an algorithm favored your post, for example, and put it on the top of the list, what does it do with the trustworthiness or the trust of students for these mechanisms? Did you have had a look at this?
Actually, I did not myself, but in the last group I was in Münster, there were a few studies done on this. For example, endorsements by others also are something that people use in making trustworthiness judgments. So if a post is liked by many people, this is as efficient, for example, as an expert who says, oh, this is a good post. So that was quite interesting, that people kind of seem to trust the whole lot of the others who like something. Other than that, I think this is there are studies that look into that, and I think what was in the past, the white male with the tie and I don't know, the suit is now a check mark, or other credentials kind of that people also take into account, because they're often used to the context and know the features that do that, but that can also be misleading, of course, especially as you see now when posts are pushed because they support an agenda in some social networks or on Facebook, where studies supposedly have found that posts that push more negative emotions are liked more, so they're featured more by algorithms. Those are kind of those things that kind of you might not know about as a user and might inform your trustworthiness judgments in a bad way, because it's not all there at face value, so to say, but there's mechanisms behind this that users might not know. Yeah.
Thank you very much for this interesting talk. The fact that the two-sided argument was beneficial for trust really intrigued me, and I was thinking about why that is. Is it like a sort of a threshold, or so when you talk about two-sided arguments, how far do you go when you talk about the other argument? And the second question I would have for that is, why do you think that this is beneficial? Is it because when you talk about the other argument, you also can make a more informed decision of why to trust the person, or is it like because of the counter argument or the other argument is debunked? I would like you to elaborate on that. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that question. This is actually a study we've done in the context of the COVID pandemic that was in my work. There are many others, and they are very interesting. But the study we did actually introduced scientific information from the Robert Koch Institute at the time about the effectiveness of wearing face masks to protect against COVID. And I think in our experiment, because we took the real scientific evidence that was there, and that was at the time, it was just after the Bundestag concluded that we were mandatory, the mask wearing was mandatory. The pro evidence was kind of a bit more positive, so that is why this decision was made also. And the negative information was not as strong. So there was, I think, in our study, people inferred, and this was our assumption that they did that the communicative intention of the other person was informative. They wanted to tell the whole truth, kind of. And assuming in the other condition where there was only one-sided information, it was also pro mask wearing, people might have inferred that the person had an agenda and wanted to persuade you, so to say. So this was this kind of hypothesis that proved to be, or we could find in the data that we could make those assumptions, or that our hypotheses were supported. But a lot of theory comes from inoculation, and you've also just said debunking, and I think here there are different mechanisms also coming into play, because it is not only about the intentions of the source, but a lot about the strength of evidence. And I think there's different things to be expected in the trustworthiness judgments there, because those are kind of persuasive strategies also, and I think it kind of depends on the study and the evidence that you support or give people that kind of inform their trustworthiness judgments, but then also inform what they previously have known about the topic. So the judgment about if it's the whole truth depends on their prior knowledge, and then also their prior attitudes, which were also highly significant covariant in the experiment. So I think there's a lot of different variables that kind of interconnect in those trustworthiness judgments. So it's not so easy to say, but we had the assumption, and the hypothesis was supported, that it was the persuasive versus the informative notion or communicative motive that people assumed in those statements.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You just mentioned prior knowledge and attitude, and I was wondering how to deal with, like, we can observe a lot of misinformation and general confusion in social media about important topics like climate change. And how do you deal with a general mistrust that is being sown into society? Because I have the perception a bit among my friends, among myself, that being in contact with misinformation, for example, about COVID vaccination, I wondered, after getting a lot of vaccinations, suddenly, if it is unsafe. I am vaccinated thrice, so I did this rational evaluation, but that's like a big question for me. How do you deal with like a shift in general society, because a bit of mistrust that can be seen everywhere?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, and I can try to answer a little bit of that. And then this, I think, would be like a whole ethical consideration that would follow that we can discuss as a whole, I think, or as a whole group tonight. But yeah, I think this is kind of... there's two sides of this. There's a good side and a bad side, and they might not be distinguishable in all sides. The very feature of digital societies and the life that we have now is that everyone can be a producer. And the scientists are very much taking on this role. In Braunschweig, there's another project looking into Twitter communication on COVID that scientists do, and I think this is something that's very relevant today to look at exactly that. How do they communicate? Do they stick with knowledge? How do they deal with being wrong at a point in the past? So kind of then they do this as a because they're inspired to do that. They don't have to do that, but it is really good that we can get this first-hand information. But then the capabilities to deal with that on the side of the user are not always so good. And then they don't only see all those scientists that supposedly tell only truthful information, which might also not be true, but also very many other sources. So it kind of is this, there's a lot of judgments that have to be done, a lot of information coming in, where the user might be kind of overwhelmed with different information, and then kind of, it is not really easy to pick out only the good pieces, and then even harder, as scientists might be wrong or might not be truthful, to pick out only the good pieces of information. So I think this kind of mistrust you said sown into society also comes along with the digital means that we have, and we cannot do something about that because we also see the affordances, the good sides of digital media, because we can use this to our advantage as well. And I don't think we want to, as a society, now I'm getting into the ethical part, as a society, roll back on all those features of being able to be our own information consumers and producers and deciding about our information environment. So I think it's kind of this, we have to deal with this as more a society or as a scientific society or community. We kind of need to develop our strategies now. I mean, this is where this project comes in, or other work, where we need to develop strategies how to get people more sensitive about this issue, that there's really a lot there, and we all need to deal with that and kind of debate it, or difficult question.